Okay, so there's groups of individuals that work in the United States law enforcement community called U.S. Marshals, and one of the things that they take care of is extradition processes. So the United States has lists of people that they have international warrants for, or they work on, if there's people that they want to put in prison in the United States, then they work on getting those people from where they're at in other countries. And the U.S. has agreements with a lot of countries to where they can speed up the process. They have extradition treaties with a lot of different countries. And then there's a few countries where they don't have extradition treaties with. But if they want you bad enough, it doesn't really matter. They can get you from anywhere. Just depends how much time and effort they want to put into it, and money, basically. But the budget's basically unlimited. It's your money, it's taxpayers' dollars, and it's there's almost zero, basically zero oversight of how the money's spent. I mean, there's oversight, but it's internal oversight. There's nobody looking at it to see and make sure that anything's done correctly. It's just it's a circus, but you would think with the amount of money they had that it would be at least successful, but it's not even a successful program. What you can expect is basically, well, if you have a warrant, they'll usually somebody like you could be on the Interpol list, red notice, something like that. You get picked up. Most often, you get picked up at an airport. Some kind of transportation by a police force from whatever country you're in, and you just get held for extradition. In my case, because there was no crime committed, I was traveling through several countries, and Interpol was doing Interpol Washington had requested participation from a lot of different agencies, intelligence agencies, and special forces military groups in other countries, and they requested everything to be kept off the books. They requested me to be followed, and satellite surveillance, and all kinds of different levels of surveillance. I noticed the people following me and all that stuff pretty early on, and hired some attorneys to combat it supposedly the correct way, before they even made any contact with me. Long before they made any contact with me, years before, actually. But to no avail. Nobody would talk to me. Nobody would talk to my attorneys. Everyone denied that what was going on was going on. The U.S. government basically denied any involvement in any kind of ongoing investigation with me, but it was all 100% at the hands of the U.S. government. But let's get back to the U.S. Marshals and talk about the extradition process. So I'll talk about how I was arrested and investigated and interrogated and all that by multiple different nations and all that in a different video. But that all happened, and then I was eventually arrested by a joint task force in Germany and held in a German prison. Supposedly that you're only allowed to be held a certain amount of time. Usually it's 30 days, but they have little checks and balances along the way. But everything can be overridden. There's little ways to say, okay, well, this needs to be done in the next 30 days. Okay, well, we did that so we can hold them longer. My case was a special case. They have a treaty with Germany. The United States has a treaty with Germany. And they waited. Germany was the third country I was in, so they were waiting until I was in Germany, and then they did surveillance on me for 2 days while I was in Germany. They had previously worked with 2 other countries on this operation, 3 other countries actually, and so while I was in Germany, they decided to organize my capture in Germany. But they didn't want to do it through the correct legal channels, so they held me in a German prison with no outside contact, illegally, like I said, for 48 days. Like I said, no outside contact. Pretty nasty conditions, pretty tough. Of course, you know, story of my life, going through tough stuff, and thanks to the man upstairs, I came out through a better man and a stronger man. Came through the other side. So anyway, I'm in German prison awaiting extradition, and I'm not giving any, I'm not, obviously it's not a great place to be for anyone, especially an American. I had no information, no rights, no human rights, nothing. You know, I wanted to get in front of a judge as soon as possible. Skip most of that to 48 days into it. Finally, a team of U.S. Marshals arrives. So I'm transported by the equivalent of a German SWAT team to from where I was at in Nuremberg, JVA, which is an old World War II prison, bunker prison, where they killed a lot of the Nazis after the Nazi, or in the Nazi trials, at the end of the Nazi trials. So pretty interesting place in and of itself. But I was transferred by a German international, kind of like a GSG-9 type team. You know, obviously there was masks and anonymity, and everything was protected. Identities were protected because of the level of risk that they considered me to be, which is, you know, kind of a joke, because I'm only fighting for my rights here, and had committed no crimes. But, you know, the U.S. government can request anything they want at that point. So since the convention's there, the extradition convention, or the as a part of the convention, the extradition treaty is there. The U.S. government only has to ask Germany, hey, Interpol Washington said, hey, hold this guy for us, and Germany will jump and do what the U.S. asks, no questions. So yeah, and when they finally got around to picking me up, they were trying to compile some evidence, I guess. I don't know what they were doing that whole time, but the U.S. Marshal showed up, and I was in a holding cell at the airport, and there was three of them, three U.S. Marshals, and I came in, well, they came in my room, and the first guy was a big steroided out ex-Ranger, ex-Army Ranger, and you know, he was probably, as far as his skill set goes, he was probably the second most capable out of a three-man team that was grossly incapable. But they came in, and they'd already been late for picking me up. They got lost in Germany, and then they went out and partied, and they were all hungover and shit. And I mean, it's probably a fun job, I guess. They're used to picking up guys with kind of basically drug addicts and drug dealers and like low-level criminals, things of that nature. People who couldn't, you know, who don't pose a threat to anyone but maybe themselves. So, you know, this guy is the classic type, you know, didn't get to see the kind of action he wanted to see in the military, and now he's kind of just angry at the world type steroid abuser who kind of like, you know, really pretty big upper body guy. Can tell he works out a lot in the gym, but the kind of the don't skip leg day kind of guy. But he rushed in the cell that I was in, and just, he looked he looks almost identical to Goldberg, which was kind of hilarious. and just kind of started like barking orders and trying to like almost create some sort of animosity between us. And I could tell he was visibly shaken. He was nervous and scared because he had probably not dealt with anybody anywhere near his size. We were about the same height and weight. And he was nervous. I mean, they had done a lot of research on me before they came to pick me up, and they were continuously, you know, referencing different things about my past and stuff I'd done and some of my skill sets and things of that nature. And you know, a kind of a nervous laughter way throughout the trip, you know, like he mentioned later, like, oh man, we're so glad you were cooperative because we didn't know what we were going to do, and we, you know, they told us to be prepared to, you know, this could be one of the worst transfers we've ever had and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, man, I just want to get in front of a judge right now. I want some legal rights. I want to get my rights restored, and I want a constitutional right, which is funny because these guys were all ex-military. One is an ex-Marine, and then actually I don't know about the third one. I've checked into them, and the third one I haven't been able to. The third one was a female, and my inside information didn't get me very far. But I actually got full reports on the other two since I got out, just doing my homework, you know. And I initially didn't even know if they were actually working for the U.S. government on official business, or if, you know, everybody thinks corruption can't be a part of the U.S. Well, I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, being arrested for a made-up crime and extradited and illegally held and things happening to me that were illegal when I was in prison or when I was under different countries' jurisdictions. I'll be the first one to tell you the U.S. is very corrupt. The government can do whatever the heck they want. In a lot of cases, they're just much better at the corruption. We're the only country in the world that fools our people into thinking that we're not corrupt, which I don't know what that says about our people, but anyway. So I checked into these guys, and yeah, just kind of a letdown for me. I thought, you know, they were supposed to be sending some of the best guys they got to pick me up, and I just had every opportunity in the world to, basically, if I wanted to fight, I could have destroyed these guys, and if I wanted to escape, I possibly could have escaped. I mean, that's kind of a retrospective history, you know, you can't really go back and say for sure, but just so many mistakes were made as far as a law enforcement type role. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, I guess, with law enforcement is under training. And if you hire somebody who's a ex-military and who's had military training, that military training may not transfer to law enforcement training, and these guys may or may not have been good soldiers, a good soldier, a good ranger, a good Marine, but that doesn't necessarily apply to being a good U.S. Marshal. In this case, it definitely didn't. I think they maybe didn't take their training very seriously, or I think in this case, their training was counterproductive because these guys were really, as a group, they were just sick individuals, mentally sick. And that's not something we need to be putting out there Contra US citizens. I guess it's a little bit different if you have a soldier who's sick, you know, and lives. These guys live for the purpose of hurting others. And I'm not going to say that's all law enforcement, but that's the type of law enforcement that we need to make sure is not in law enforcement. It's different if it's a soldier, you know. I guess it's still bad. It's bad to gain your enjoyment from the pain of others, but in my case, I was lucky because they're the type person that preys on the weak. They're bullies, and I'm not weak, so I was lucky. But at one point in the transfer process, I was there's an underground holding facility, and I was next to a Al Qaeda guy, or I'm not 100% sure Al Qaeda. He was some sort of a terrorist, and they caught him at the Atlanta airport, and he was underneath in one of the holding cells that I was right next to him, and he was doing his prayers to Allah and all that, and I had overheard them talking about how he was on the terror list pretty high up and all that, and they caught him just traveling through the Atlanta airport. And I flew in from Munich to directly to Atlanta. I was in shackles and handcuffs, for shackles on my feet, handcuffs here. They put a jacket on me where I put my hands through the pockets, and they zipped the jacket up. So my waist chain, handcuffs, and so if you were, and I was on public planes, but they boarded me on the plane early onto the back of the plane. So if you were on the plane next to me, you just thought I had my hands in my pockets for 14 hours on the flight or whatever. So, you know, that's interesting. So always look on the back of the plane, guys, on international flights. You might have somebody getting extradited. Huh. But yeah, where was I at? Talking about, oh, so yeah. So these guys, when we were in Atlanta, there was another U.S. Marshal who acted as our kind of chauffeur. Some really short, pretty grossly overweight guy, pretty hilarious. But the gentleman knew the airport well. Of course, it's the #1 or #2 busiest airport in the world. You guys have been through Atlanta, probably know that. So it's just crazy. This guy has backstage passes, if you will, to everything. So they were discussing what they had done to people, these U.S. Marshals, the 3 I was with and then this other one, and they're sitting there talking like I wasn't there. At this point, they just got completely complacent with me because I was, you know, even though I legally would have had the right to fight, constitutionally, it wouldn't be protected. My rights were already stripped, and since I was illegal, I would have had the right to fight the illegal arrest, but they would have just put more charges on me. You know, the written laws are not how they're practiced. You know, my rights were violated from the get-go. So in retrospect, I handled the situation correctly. I'm scot-free now. Everything is past. I've just lost I've lost millions of dollars and a huge chunk of my life to the government's trying to incarcerate me for life in prison. At this point, I've beat 3 life sentences for all 3 for crimes I did not commit. But these guys were discussing things that they've done to go out of their way when they found somebody who was weak to hurt them. They told this one story, and this is a little bit gruesome, and I'm gonna try and keep this as G-rated and as moral as I can, but it's just absolutely disgusting to begin with. But they normally, like I said, they normally arrest people who are like drug addicts, people with problems like that, prostitutes and drug addicts and all of the above, and just weak people. And it's sad. It's the kind of people that we need to be doing stuff to help or trying to help, and those are the people that they're out there hurting and abusing and beating up. And anyway, at this point, they're talking about their dogs, and they're telling stories about how they train their dogs to maul people, and the worst injuries that they've had their dogs inflict on people. And so the one story that just burnt in my mind kind of was, they're telling this story about this girl she's a prostitute, and they've been looking for her. She skipped bail or something, you know, drug crack addict, and they found her in a house, and you know, this huge team of U.S. Marshals and, you know, SWAT team at the ready and all this for this prostitute, and she's completely naked in the house looking at a computer screen, and they're laughing about how the laptop is like cracked, really cheap laptop, and she's looking at porn, She's looking at pornography on the computer, and she's naked, and she's in no way a threat to anyone, obviously. And they decide to send the dogs in to attack her for fun. So they sent the dogs in and just mauled her terribly, and let the dogs maul her for a little while for fun, and then arrested her sequentially. Then they told the story about how they found her a few months later dead. They were looking for her again. They found her dead and frozen to the sidewalk in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they're just laughing, and how hilarious this is. And they said, they're just using pretty disgusting language and terminology, and they said, oh, that's the beep, that's her. I know, I don't want to peel her body off of the sidewalk. So they removed some of her clothing. They cut off some of her clothing at where they knew that she had scars and missing like tissue on her limbs from where the dogs had mauled her. It was several months later, but she had all kinds of marks from the dogs. And so they used those marks to identify her, so they didn't have to unstick her from the sidewalk that she was frozen to. And that just how hilarious that was, that they could identify this person they were looking for through the marks that their dogs, the permanent disfigurement that their dogs had done. Then they talked about other ones. They sicked the dog on some guy, another guy who was harmless and didn't need the dogs put on him, but they didn't like the guy. So then they told him, hey, I guess he was talking crap to him the time before, and they said the next time you're going to pay for this. And when they got the opportunity to follow through on their threat, they sicked the dogs on him, and the dogs ripped his jaw off. And they were talking about how all this muscle tissue on the side of his face was showing and hanging, and his jaw was actually removed from his face. So yeah, I'm just sitting there listening to that, and they're bragging about which one of them has hurt somebody the worst in their supposed pursuit of justice. And the worst thing to me is these guys, first of all, two of them were previous military. I think the third was a female, kind of an out-of-shape female. The Marine guy was probably the most skilled, but had some serious PTSD issues, I guess, if you will. He was I could tell he must have been having all kind of, just, he wasn't there, and he had some concentration issues and stress and control issues, and you could tell he didn't look healthy. And he slept a lot of the way. He couldn't stay awake for the flight, things of that nature, little cues that gave it away. But he probably had the most advanced skill set out of all of them, but had some serious mental issues he was dealing with, unfortunately. I don't like to see anybody that can't handle stress, war stress, or whatever kind of stress he had been dealing with. I mean, I guess if you're out there hurting your fellow countrymen, that probably brings its own level of stress, I would imagine. But I don't like to see, I don't like to see anybody hurt. Anyway, yeah, handcuffs, shackles, the little jacket thing, they loaded me through the back of the plane, onto the back of the flight, a few different flights by the time I made it back to Utah. And I was in handcuffs for about 30 hours, handcuffs and shackles. The thing is, guys, these guys especially took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. So when you just violate your oath, you know, that you've taken, a man in this world, or human being, doesn't really have much else than our word, and our word is our bond, it's our honor. And when we lose that, we've kind of lost our way in life. And these law enforcement officers that openly agree to violate the oath that they've taken to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, I mean, where do you go from that point, you know? Where do you go from there? When you clearly know that you're infringing constitutional rights, you know, these guys were doing it in particular because they got enjoyment from preying on the weak, and they found a way to legally do it, and to do it in a way that's acceptable in today's society. So I think the first thing we need to do is to root out all law enforcement who's doing it, who became a law enforcement officer because of that type person that they got bullied in high school, so now they want to get out there and power trip and hurt people. We need to get rid of the people who are ex-military, who got a taste for blood, so to speak, or who are out there trying to get a piece of the action so they can, you know, hurt people. And especially, you know, we don't need U.S. Marshals out there beating up crackheads for fun, or sicking their dogs on people. You know, that's disgusting. Our law enforcement is the laughingstock of the world right now, the entire world. You know, I'm constantly traveling the world, and the United States is known for its police brutality. We should be, you know, there was a time when we were the number one in a lot of areas. We had the best education, we had the best, you know, this, that, or the other. Now we're number one at nothing except obesity, and the most people incarcerated in the world per capita. It's disgusting what we've become as people, and we're making money off of our for-profit system of putting our own people in prison, and slave labor and all of this. And it's just, we need to do something. It's not irreversible, but we're getting to the point where it's going to be irreversible. So I guess I've strayed a little bit off topic here, but that's about what I expected. You know, handcuffs, or that's what you guys probably expected. Putting my 2 cents in as we go, but that's basically what it was. Handcuffs, shackles, waist chain, commercial flights sitting on the back of the plane, team of inept U.S. Marshals who have an unlimited budget of your tax dollars and still can't seem to be good at what they do somehow. I guess maybe it's hard to find good people. I have no idea. I was then released with an apology. I've had 4 different district attorneys through the state of Utah on this case, and then the most recent one I had basically got this case dropped in his lap and said, you know, there's no case here. It's very clear that this guy committed no crime. So what they actually did was they made up a completely false scenario, and they told me, hey, sign this paper that says this false scenario occurred, and we'll let you go with a misdemeanor, a made-up misdemeanor. And I said, why would I do that? Well, here's the alternative. You're in Utah, you're not Mormon, you're in a Mormon-controlled system. You know, the Mormon hierarchy of the Mormon church, of this cult. I don't know if you've heard of the Mormon LDS church. It's a cult in Utah, but this hierarchy controls the state, politics, government, everything. There's no separation of church and state. So all of these, the judges and lawyers and everyone, prosecutor, district attorneys, they're all in the church, and somebody up in the church is calling the shots for them to do in their work career in the justice system, for them, telling them what to do. Wow, crazy. So the guy tells me, you know, hey, you're not Mormon. Everyone else here is Mormon. I'm gonna put you, if you don't sign this paper, I'm gonna put you in front of a jury, and it's not gonna be a United States of America 12-person jury. It's gonna be I don't remember if he said 8 or 10 people, but it's gonna be a Utah jury. They're all gonna be Mormons, guaranteed all Mormons. I'm gonna make sure that you have all Mormons on your trial. and they're going to put you in prison. They're going to sentence you to a life in prison crime indefinitely. And when you get to prison, it's going to be Mormon officials that I'm friends with that are going to sentence you. You won't be sentenced by a judge. And it's going to be a punishable by life crime, and they're going to leave you in prison for the rest of your life, guaranteed. The only option you have is to sign this paper, because we made a mistake. Sign this paper. Basically, they knew the only way they could convict me was through illegal means. And I think the only reason they didn't proceed with it is because of the little bit of exposure I have. And right before this, I had 2 videos go out that hit 1 million subscribers together. They both hit 500,000 subscribers. And if it wasn't for my influence and YouTube channel, I honestly think that these guys would not have offered me this. But they were afraid that people would find out about this. So please share this video. Help me tell my story. Because the stir that this created on the international level is one of the reasons I think that I'm free today, and that I wasn't just hidden away in a prison for the rest of my life. The main reason I think is because God has a plan for my life, and I think God used my YouTube channel, and that's why I'm putting all this into YouTube, because now I have an outreach for my ministry and my testimony. This is what happened. This is my life. This has happened to nobody else ever, and I can tell about it, and I can tell that God got me through this insurmountable odds, fighting against the U.S. government, the most powerful organization in the world, and coming out on the other side. Pretty amazing, and only by the grace of God and through His power was I able to do this. So yeah, guys, comment below. Let me know what you think. Share this video. Pretty crazy story, and let me know what else you guys want to know, and what else you want to hear. Bone out.